Howdy y'all. Clarifying 3 things real quick. Number 1, I could be wrong with some of these charges, as I'm not an actual lawyer or have gone to law school before. I'm using multiple sources from the internet to help me convict characters. Number 2, none of this is actual legal advice and exists only for entertainment. Number 3, we will only be counting crimes that we either see on screen or mention at all. It's very likely the characters have committed more crimes than what we see, but since there's no way to confirm that, any non-mentioned crimes will not be counted. Number 4, we will start with the crimes we do see in the order of the missions and cutscenes, and then the crimes that were only mentioned. These will include crimes mentioned in the log files. First up, the crimes that we saw on the screen playing out before us. Black Dawn. In Black Dawn, we see JACKDAW cause a car crash by shooting at it while standing in the way, and we also hear him shoot 2 of the operatives and gravely injured Rose. The deaths of Updraft and Pathfinder, the murdered operatives, are confirmed in the Epoch log file. This one scene alone already earns him multiple charges. First of all, he intentionally crashes their car. Even though he himself was not driving, most states identify a vehicular assault as intentionally using a car to injure people. While again, he was not driving, he still technically used a car to injure someone on purpose, so this will earn him a vehicular assault charge. We also hear no fire being returned, and JACKDAW takes his time when he was attacking the operatives, which means they were unresponsive or too injured to defend themselves, so they were all gravely injured by the accident. He will get the maximum of 7 years and 6 months in prison. What's even worse is that even though the crash itself didn't kill them, he still went in there and purposefully murdered 2 of the operatives right after the car crashed. Since this incident was not caused by the crash and was JACKDAW's own choice, this will count as 2 first-degree murder charges, as opposed to being counted as part of the accident, since he could have very easily walked away but purposely planned to kill them. Black Dawn happened in Arizona, and Arizona law says that first-degree murders result in either life in prison or death sentences. Given how painful and heartless their deaths were, a judge would most likely not have any sympathy for JACKDAW and give him 2 death sentences. While he spared Rose on purpose, we still hear him injure her as he shoots her 2 times in order to avoid suspicion of her being a traitor placed on her. In order for an assault charge to be Class 4, there has to be actual bodily harm or reasonable fear of it happening, which did occur, which will result in a Class 4 assault charge. If you don't know what that means, there's different classifications of assault, and Class 4 is basically the worst. Once again, JACKDAW was a known dangerous criminal, which means he would be given the maximum sentence of 25 years for this. Next up, the Ashes cutscene. In Ashes, we see JACKDAW hold the freelancer at gunpoint and force them to deliver a message to the director. Although the freelancer was not physically harmed throughout this exchange, the definition of Class 4 assault also includes the reasonable fear and possibility of a victim being hurt or killed, so this will equate to yet another Class 4 assault charge, and once again resulting in another 25 years of prison. And, by threatening the freelancer's life and making them do something they had no legal obligation to do, that will count as a coercion charge. The only source I could find regarding punishment about this says that the maximum charge for this is 3 years, which is what will give JACKDAW. Since JACKDAW has committed various crimes, he will be getting the max sentence for pretty much everything. This will likely change with other characters depending on the severity of what they've done and their state of mind. I do plan on doing more videos with these characters. JACKDAW was extremely sound of mind while committing all these crimes and knew exactly what he was doing the whole time, which will certainly not earn the court's sympathy for him. Dedication. In Dedication, JACKDAW shoots and kills Ren, as well as taking the freelancer somewhere. Surprisingly, JACKDAW will actually be off the hook here. Even though JACKDAW purposefully murdered Ren, in the USA, he would get a pass for self-defense, because he intervened specifically to protect the freelancer and did not arrive with premeditated attempt to murder Ren. That was a bit of a mouthful. It can vary from state to state, with some claiming that you have to do everything to try to stop this act before you perform any bodily harm, but by the time JACKDAW arrived, Ren had already shot the freelancer multiple times. I think any court would agree that it was far beyond the point of return. Some may argue that taking the freelancer away would also equate to a kidnapping charge, but JACKDAW is let off the hook here as well. The freelancer quickly fell unconscious after Ren's murder, and was in no state to ask for medical assistance, which gave JACKDAW implied consent to treat him, which is exactly what JACKDAW did. He took the freelancer to a medical facility where their injuries were tended to. Not only that, but the freelancer also willingly stayed with JACKDAW in Phoenix after fully recovering, which makes it clear that the freelancer appreciated and wanted treatment, even if he never directly gave consent. So shockingly, JACKDAW actually did nothing wrong here. Everything he did in this scene was legal. The Withdrawal. I can't pronounce that word. Although JACKDAW didn't do the heavy lifting for this mission, he did commit the crime of organizing stolen property by coordinating the mission and instructing the freelancer on what to do. This has a maximum sentence of 30 years and a $10,000 fine. The Scientist. Not only was JACKDAW also coordinating this mission, he also faces additional charges because of him ordering the freelancer to take out every single operative in the house. While he himself did not commit the crimes, he ordered them to be done, so he will also face conviction. The number of people in the house varies depending on your difficulty that you're playing on. Since the operative difficulty seems to be the average one, since it's in the middle, we're going to go with that. I try not to rely on the wiki since it's literally a Wikipedia, which means it's unreliable, but I have no choice but to do so here to count the number of guards. There are a total of 12 guards, including Falcon, on operative difficulty. It doesn't matter if the freelancer does loud or stealth in this case, that's the dilemma we'll get into their legal point video. Because either way, the second squad kills every operative the freelancer didn't, so JACKDAW's responsible for their deaths either way. Since these are planned, and the scientist happens in Canada, I did some research and it says that anyone who ordered someone to commit a murder is guilty of what they call an indictable offense and can get a maximum of life in prison. Since JACKDAW did this to 12 people, he would get 12 charges of indictable offenses plus 12 life sentences. The scientist is in a similar situation to the Withdrawal in terms of planning the crime, but not exactly the same since he didn't steal any objects, he only picked up Dr. Rivera. I couldn't find anything about planning a breaking and entering, but since Canada seems to view conspirators to be just as guilty as the ones who actually committed the crime, we're going to give him a charge for breaking and entering, which shockingly from what I've seen, can also equal a life sentence. Actually, first-time offenders and minor criminals would most likely just get a jail sentence, but again the court is going to see JACKDAW as someone almost impossible to sympathize with, considering all that he's done, and given his other crimes, will also give him the maximum sentence of life. Oh well, at least JACKDAW once again evades a kidnapping charge, since Rivera was extracted willingly. The SCRS. This one is also like the Withdrawal, but even worse considering that he didn't just break into some Halcyon warehouse this time. He ordered the freelancer to break into a Canadian government building. Not only will this get him the same charge of organizing stolen property, and another 30 years and $10,000 of fines paid, but another breaking and entering charge and another life sentence as well. I've tried to look to see if Canada had any laws against breaking into government buildings, but that seems to only be covered by the USA. I couldn't find anything online about Canadian laws for it. Even then, I'm sure Canada won't be happy, so they'll slap an additional breaking and entering charge for that offense. He didn't get one in the Withdrawal because that kind of falls under the organizing stolen property charge, but I'm sure in this case Canada would want to lay it thick onto him. Black Dusk. Black Dusk is yet another bloodbath for JACKDAW, since he once again sends the freelancer into a building with the intent on killing everybody inside, even including the freelancer themselves this time. I will once again have to rely on the wiki for the numbers and use operative difficulty as a base. 39 operatives would be inside at the time, excluding the freelancer. The explosion kills everybody inside, which means 39 indictable offenses and 39 life sentences. Since the freelancer dies willingly, and JACKDAW seemed desperate to actually keep them alive and was hoping they wouldn't die, the freelancer's death will be a lesser charge of involuntary manslaughter with a maximum of 8 years. It can also result in a fine, but since the freelancer doesn't have any known family they can pay money to, and I can't find a source saying how much that fine is, we're just going to leave that one out. And of course, JACKDAW blows up the entire bunker, which would normally be a destruction of property charge, but since the explosion was so devastating, used on purpose against a property inside the USA, and it killed 40 people, he's going to get 8 charges of use of weapons of mass destruction, 1 for each bomb planted. He will get 8 life sentences as a result. He almost got the terrorism charge, but for that it would have to be committed either against the government or citizens. Halcyon is full of illegal criminals. The building itself may have been leased by the Canadian government, but the explosion was specifically targeted at Halcyon, and terrorism is partially defined by the goal. In this instance, the explosion had nothing to do with trying to intimidate the Canadian government, so JACKDAW just barely dodges the terrorism charge by the skin of his teeth. Epilogue. In Epilogue, there isn't much to say. JACKDAW just straight up shoots the director. 1 first-degree murder charge and a death sentence charge for him. This would be aggravated assault if the director survived, since he was tempted into the murder because of how the director wronged him, but he died, so it's just plain murder. Let's move on to the next section, the crimes that were only mentioned but we didn't get to see on the screen. Epoch File. The Epoch File states that JACKDAW stole the Onyx blueprints during Black Dawn. Given how expensive that project was, it definitely caps Arizona's legal value limit of $25,000, which means he will get a grand larceny charge for this. He will also get the maximum fine of $150,000 as well. All the sources I saw were very flimsy on what the max sentence for grand larceny was, with some being as high as 8 years and 6 months. Since this is JACKDAW we're talking about, we're going to give him that. Backlash file. The Backlash file has a lot of crimes, so we're going to plow through them all real quick. A lot of these aren't confirmed to be linked to JACKDAW, but since Halcyon themselves suspect that's the case, and none of these crimes are out of character for JACKDAW, I think the court would buy it. Well, there is one crime out of order, but there's no one else who would have done it. 4 Halcyon members disappeared in Egypt. Even though they're likely dead, there's no confirmation of this, so for once he cannot avoid these 4 kidnapping charges. Egypt has some very strange laws regarding kidnapping depending on who it is, and since these are 4 grown people, he will get 20 years of prison, 5 for each person who disappeared. A safe house in Paris was bombed, and since it was directed at Halcyon, this will be another use of weapon of mass destruction charge, and a life sentence. A courier disappears in Canada, which is another kidnapping charge. Since this happened in Canada, he will get a maximum of 7 years. There would be even more if someone could prove there was a firearm involved, but even though that's likely, there's no evidence pointing towards it. A squad disappeared in Canada again, but he will only be getting 3 kidnapping charges and 21 years, 7 for each operative kidnapped, because the team leader defected to Phoenix, creating reasonable doubt as to whether that operative actually didn't want to be taken, so they can't be counted as kidnapped. I can't find a source directly telling me what the charge for crashing a plane would be. Again, this can't be terrorism, since it wasn't against the government or any citizens, so I'll just call it reckless endangerment and give him the maximum of 7 years. The next crime is just plain impressive. He wiped out 3 teams at the same exact time when all of them were in completely different countries. This means 12 accounts of first-degree murder, with 4 happening in Ireland, 4 happening in France, and 4 happening in the UK. In France, the max punishment for this is 30 years, so times 4 for that team murdered equals 120 years of prison. In the UK, a murder charge means life, so that's 4 life sentences as well. Finally, Ireland is the same way, so that's an additional 4 life sentences. There was an arms deal gone wrong where it was possible that the dealer was coerced into shooting the 4 operatives. That's a coercion charge with a maximum of 3 years. Another facility was bombed in China. I can't find anything about using a weapon of mass destruction, so the best I can do is make this one a destruction property charge with a maximum of 3 years and $30,000 in fines. A squad in Poland vanishes, which is 4 more kidnapping charges. I can only find sources about child abduction regarding kidnapping in Poland, so we're just going to copy Egypt's punishment since they have very similar kidnapping laws, and give JACKDAW 20 years, 5 for each operative kidnapped. Ren and Rose were almost assassinated in Seattle, and the shooter wasn't found. This will result in 2 attempted murder charges, with a maximum punishment of 80 years, 40 for each operative. This is slightly off topic, but I feel like this event basically confirms that JACKDAW had a breakdown at some point. Even the director pointed out how oddly emotional this decision was for a normally calculating and ruthless man like JACKDAW, especially since Rose was on his side. You can't tell me this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, fueled by grief and anger from his situation and the betrayal. Okay, getting back on track. JACKDAW stole data from Halcyon, which is considered hacking, and will get him the max sentence of 10 years and $10,000 in fines. Later on, he tries to hack Halcyon again, but he fails this time. This is an attempted hacking charge, and since he didn't succeed, he'll only get a year this time. Ember Shroud / the Monaco file. For Ember Shroud, there is a lot to unpack. Of course, JACKDAW's assassination attempt happened, but that doesn't have any legal bearing on him, so that won't be important for this video. During the mission, JACKDAW, Rose, and Ren lit the building on fire. This is an arson charge, and will earn JACKDAW a 10-year prison sentence. They also interrogated and then executed Julian Moreau. In the USA, this would be a coercion charge too, but I can find nothing of the sort in Monaco, so it must not be considered a crime there. First-degree murder is a valid charge, but I can't find anything regarding the punishment. Since other countries' laws for murder have been fierce, I'm going to say this one is likely a life sentence. Sociopath file. When Ren was murdered, he was said to have been buried. In most states of the USA, you can bury bodies on your own property, but JACKDAW did not own the land he buried Ren in. Which means this is an abuse of a corpse charge, since trying to illegally conceal a body counts as such. The only source I can find regarding something like this says the maximum sentence is 7 years. Turns out, JACKDAW did something wrong in dedication after all. He can be innocent of no crime. Provenance file. JACKDAW, the director, conspired to kill 5 people, and it's later confirmed that JACKDAW carries it out. This is 5 accounts of first-degree murder. However, considering that JACKDAW carried out these murders believing they were for the greater good, and being tricked by the director, instead of the maximum, he will get 200 years of prison, 40 for each person murdered. And now, the results. Totaling all of JACKDAW's crimes and sentences together, this is what his criminal record looks like. Oh my god, I'm gonna have to take a deep breath for this one. Vehicular assault, 21 accounts of first-degree murder, 2 accounts of class 4 assault, 2 accounts of coercion, 2 accounts of organized and stolen property, 51 accounts of indictable offenses, 2 accounts of breaking and entering, involuntary manslaughter, 9 accounts of use of weapon of mass destruction, grand larceny, 12 accounts of kidnapping, reckless endangerment, hacking, destruction of property, 2 attempted murders, attempted hacking, arson, and abuse of a corpse. The punishment, when all the sentences are tallied up, equates to 543 years of prison, 71 life sentences, 3 death sentences, and $210,000 in fines. Out of context, if someone read this list of me and saying, this is how many crimes I want this character to commit, I would say that's too unrealistic for a story. I really would. This is insane. And this is only a handful of what JACKDAW has done. He has years of experience, years of being a criminal. He's done so many other things in this. And even though we never caught him catching the terrorism charge, I'm sure he's done something that would incite it. We just haven't seen it yet. He is a crazy, crazy man. Moral of the story? International laws are complicated. Oh, and also, revenge is bad. Don't create a criminal organization to try to murder your former best friend. All that jazz. I hope y'all really enjoyed that one, because I know I did. This is probably one of the few videos that I'm actually really proud of. And I'd hope to do this kind of video format, which is called Legal Point, which will be, dealing with all things legal when it comes to Entry Point and its characters. Once again, I'm no lawyer, I'm not qualified to give actual lawyer advice, and none of this is law advice. If you happen to be convicted of any of the crimes on JACKDAW's list, consult an actual lawyer, not me. Alright, see y'all.